I would. I'd like to call the meeting back into session. We had two closed sessions, one regarding director's evaluation, no action was taken, and regarding the labor relations, no action was taken. And now we'll move along to the agenda. I'd like to welcome you all. Thank you for coming. I have one announcement to make, basically two. First of all, for those of you that need to know, the restrooms are down those stairs to the right, so that you don't have to go outside to go to the restroom. Downstairs and to the right. Secondly, I wanted to announce that we had the grand jury report. We received the grand jury report, and first of all, I wanted to publicly thank members of the grand jury for spending so much time and attention on our library system, and I do appreciate that we are a public entity and we serve the public, and I'm so glad that we have people paying interest and time to help us able to serve the public better. So thank you to the grand jury. And then secondly, because of the nature of the meeting tonight, we will be discussing the grand jury report at the August meeting, which is August 1st. But I did want to mention that. Okay, we are ready to move into some presentations before we open the public hearing. And before we even begin that, I wanted to say a couple of things. One of them is that this particular issue is something that we've been talking about probably since Measure M, and that we have been spending a lot of time in committee, and a lot of people have spent a lot of time dealing with these issues about possibly finding more funding for the library. Secondly, I think I would be extremely remiss if I didn't thank staff for the amount of time, effort, diligence, and hard work, if that's not redundant, to make all the documents work and be ready and available for us for tonight's public hearing. So thank you to the staff for service excellent. And with that said, I believe we'll start with Brett.
Mr. Chairman, public appearances for matters not on the agenda. I've come for that. Thank you, sir.
Excuse me, but that was before closed session?
I was here at 6:30. It said 6:30.
All right, you may make a public statement.
Thank you, sir.
Hello, sir. My name is Dwayne DeWitt. I'm from Roseland. I wanted to thank you for all the efforts you've put forward to help with the Roseland branch. And I know that during tough economic times, one of the first things that comes up is, well, it's temporary, and maybe we shouldn't fund that as we go forward. No matter what path you take, I hope you will look to making sure that that Roseland branch can stay there in existence in perpetuity. Once this new project's going forward at the Roseland Village, the people who are working on that, Mid-Peninsula Housing, if they get the final agreement with the county, should be able to make the facility available for you to have a Roseland branch there. And I think this is really important. I know that, having read many of the documents, that you'll often be thinking that there's not going to be enough funding somehow, and that's a place where you can scrimp because you don't really have a permanent branch there. But I would like you to treat it as a permanent branch from this point forward. And I know that that might seem odd, but I know that's what they do with temporary classrooms on schools. They put them up and they stay there forever. So do that with this Roseland Library branch also. And then one last thing. I'd come to you in the past and I'd talked about the idea of how you could put a little bit of a fee on multimedia checkouts. And as I looked at the PowerPoint for today, it says for books, there's over 3 million checkouts of books. And I had done a little research and seen that 40% of the volume of checkouts for this multimedia stuff. So just looking at that on a round ball figure, that's over 1 million of the checkouts are those multimedia, DVDs, movies, different things like that. If you put a fee on that, that could run into some serious money. And it's not, what would you call it, an imposition on people. I've seen people go down there and get 10 movies and then sit there and watch them all day for free, where if you have to go to the theater, you'd be paying money. That's money you folks could use. And it's not something that's different from the basic system that we have in America of fee for service. So please look at that. That's different than books. Libraries were set up for books, not to be movies. All righty. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. And go Roseland. All right.
So good evening, Commissioners. I'm Brett Lear, the Library Director. I wanted to spend about 5 to 10 minutes with you just going over some of the backstory of our library's finances and how we got to this point of considering a sales tax measure. Some of these slides will look familiar. We can start by just reviewing how robust and busy of a library system we are. We see about 2 million people walk through our doors each year. Another 2 million visit us online. We check out about 3.2 million books a year, as the gentleman just mentioned, and about 73,000 children attend our educational classes and events each year. As far as funding, our projected revenue for the coming year is about $17.4 million. In any given year, anywhere between 0 and 5% of our funding comes from private giving, and that's usually from our friends and foundation. Just last week, I refigured our library expenditures per capita. We're at about $35 here in Sonoma County. Marin's around $58, Napa $81, and San Francisco $131. So again, you can see some discrepancies between our funding and our neighbors. This is how we allocate our budget. The next slide. Right now, about 73.7 go towards our valuable personnel. About 10% goes towards materials, and then some money goes towards maintaining IT. About 5% towards our buildings, and then really for the services that we provide, other than staffing and materials, we're left with about 7% of our budget to do everything else. So the issue, we're busy libraries. We serve children, families, employers, people of all ages, yet we struggle to maintain some of our basic library services, such as books, our buildings, educational opportunities for kids, technology, and we struggle to provide adequate service hours for our community. We saw that 25% cut to our library hours in 2011, and we're still closed Sundays except for Central and Mondays across the board. We've got about $8 million in deferred maintenance to our buildings, about another $1.5 million that we're behind in our IT infrastructure. Then we really should be spending about $500,000 more a year on materials to bring some of those waiting lists down that we all experience. I see this as an ongoing issue. During every recession, our revenue plummets when property values go down. That's unfortunate because during recessions, people flock to their libraries, they cancel their home internet, they buy fewer books online, and they start using their libraries even more heavily. So we're pretty much inversely in sync with our public during recessions. We've had a 22.5-cent tax rate since the mid-'70s. I've never worked anywhere that had such a low tax rate. And then Prop 13 really locked us into that. So on most years, our tax revenue will increase by what property taxes can increase by, and that's by 2% a year. So I do tell people that we're trying to run a 21st century library on 1970s funding model. As you can see, historically, over time, our hours have continued to drop, and to me that means that we've really struggled for our revenue to keep pace with our expenditures, and what suffered is hours and other areas of service. Our libraries today, we're closed Sundays again, except for Central and Mondays. We have that 25% cut that's still in effect. Some services that are at risk are our youth and education budget. Our Friends and Foundation primarily fund the classes and events that you see in our libraries. Until this year, they funded 100% of that. And for this year, we, for the first time, established a modest budget for events. We don't have computer labs at any of our permanent buildings. We have aging library facilities. That photo there is from the recent facilities master plan. We've got leaky roofs in our buildings. And we have limited capacity for community outreach. The outreach that we are able to do is through staff time, carving a few moments out of their desk schedules in order to get out and interact with the public. And I do feel that we have an over-reliance on our Friends and Foundation for funding basic library services. Our Friends and Foundations buy our chairs and tables and computers and fund our children's classes. So we spent a good deal of time over the last year and a half talking to our community. We talked to about 2,000 people through our strategic planning process. We've talked to about another 4,000 through our public information campaign, through public surveying, and about, well, where are we at, Jayleen, now? About 4,000 people, I believe, have written in on those cards that we sent out with the mailers. And throughout, we've been asking the people, what do they value about their libraries? They love our librarians. They want to see more opportunity or educational opportunities for kids. They want to see hours restored. They want to see their buildings in better condition. They want to see IT that functions most of the time, and upgrades, and our public values reading and literacy. So the Revenue Enhancement Committee and I and our CFO, again, have spent over a year looking at how we can adequately fund this library system. We looked at grants, private giving, and corporate sponsorships, but none of those are a reliable source of funding, and certainly none of them would generate the type of revenue that this organization needs. And we've also looked at other taxes, such as parcel tax. So at this point, the Revenue Enhancement Committee has made a recommendation to consider a 1/8 sales tax for the November ballot. I, as the library director, certainly also encourage you to strongly consider that. A sales tax really seems to be the only viable path forward to financial health. It's a tax. Sales tax would be a little more recession-proof than is a parcel tax. Folks still buy goods and services during a recession, and it would pass some of the costs on to tourists who also do use our libraries. The next slide shows you what a more healthy library budget would look like if we were to receive the revenue from a 1/8 sales tax. It would allow us to flesh out those areas right now that are very lean. We could invest more in our buildings, do more for educational classes and events for children and adults. We could invest more in IT, and we could boost our materials budget to, again, reduce some of those waiting lists that are up to 6 months long. You've seen this graph before on the next slide, but it's what our CFO anticipates will happen without additional revenue in the years ahead, and this is us staying at status quo spending, but we'll see in the next 2 years onwards, you'll see that gap start to widen between expenditures and revenue. And again, that's with status quo spending. Done quite a bit of thinking about what our future as an organization will look like if we're not better funded. Over 30,000 school children will continue to be locked out of their libraries on Sundays and Mondays. The 9,000 job seekers in the county won't be able to access want ads and apply to jobs online on Sundays when the want ads are published. Currently, there's 90,000 residents without home computers in our county who rely on the library as a source of access to computers, and there's another 125,000 without high-speed internet. And again, we'll have folks that continue to wait a long period of time for the book that they want. We have a wonderful strategic plan in place. Again, we spent a year talking to residents, hearing what they wanted of their library systems. They want excellent customer service. They want more education and discovery opportunities. They want a library that innovates. They want to see us even more engaged out in the community. But they also understand that it all does rely on financial sustainability. So from my perspective, in order to become a healthy library system, we have to maintain our current funding, but we do need to seek additional revenue as well. Again, our public has made very clear what they want. They want to see library hours restored. They want to see upgrades in technology. They want us to maintain our facilities. They want us to do more for children in terms of classes and events, and also to have the books there that children need. And they love our wonderful librarians. So with that, again, I wanted to give some context to what we're talking about tonight in terms of revenue, and I'm happy to answer any questions before turning it over back to Tim.
Yes.
Thank you, Brett. I appreciate the presentation, and I just had a question on the funding section. I know we often refer to how much we spend and we compare it to other library systems in the North Bay, and that's where the chart comes in. And I just wanted to clarify that we're comparing apples to apples when we compare the per capita funding. One of the things that makes us strong is our partnerships with our various members of the JPA, so cities like Sonoma, where I'm from. And I know in Sonoma, the city provides us with a rent-free building that they also maintain. In fact, in the last several years, the city made, I think, about a $1.5 million investment to improve the building, and all of that is at no charge to the library. So, in addition to the zero rent. And so I'm wondering if the libraries that we compared ourselves to have similar partnerships. Do they own their own buildings? Do they have that kind of cost incorporated in these numbers? Because I think that's a really important thing we don't want to, that should go stated, is our partnerships with our cities.
That's a good point. I know several months back I had our CFO, Ken Neiman, call around to our neighboring libraries and ask which do receive help on their buildings and that from their cities and towns. I don't know if you can recollect that on the fly, Ken, but we have analyzed that, and it varies by library to library system around the North Bay.
Other questions from commissioners?
Just to follow up on that, that can make our numbers look low because we don't pay for, at least we don't pay in Sonoma for rent, and I think a number of the other cities in the JPA do the same, have the same arrangement. So it can make the per capita number look lower than it would to other cities where they own their own buildings and have to do that kind of, pay the rent themselves.
Thank you. Other questions or comments from commissioners? All right. Thank you, Brett.
Welcome.
I believe our next issue is a report on the latest polling data.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission. My name is Brian Godby from Godby Research, and my firm did the polling, so I'm here to walk you through the details. I'm not quite as tall as Brett is, though. To begin with, obviously you commissioned this project to conduct a tracking survey because we had done a similar survey back in the end of last year. We wanted to look at the libraries regarding the funding and library service priorities. We wanted to assess potential support for a sales tax measure to maintain and restore library services. We wanted to prioritize projects and programs to be funded, and we wanted to test various educational information on how that might impact the voter support. And then there's a variety of other information that we use to weight the data and make sure it is representative of the universe of likely voters. This survey was a telephone and online survey. The universe that we interviewed was 2,000 200,004 likely November 2016 voters in the county. While we did online as well as telephone, the online were not just random people from social media. You had to be a registered voter. That we had an email address that we could invite you to the survey, so it wasn't just everybody on Facebook. The fielding dates were June 20th through the 28th. The average phone interview was 20 minutes long. We don't know how long they are online because people can start and stop and go have dinner and come back and finish it later. We do know that they complete the surveys at all times of the day and night, which is good because we're on their schedule rather than them being on our schedule, and that's important for reliability of the survey. The completed sample size was 748 interviews. Of that, 342 were online, 72 were via cell phone, 334 were landline, and that gives us a margin of error of plus or minus 3.45%. Jumping into the data, the first question was our ballot question, and you can see that in the box on the right-hand side of the slide. This is an 8-cent sales tax. It provides about $12 million a year for over a 10-year period, and it would fund the things that we have bulleted in the wording. This was also vetted by your council, so it is legal. It's not just something pollsters make up. And it's legal, meaning to be on the ballot. The way we judge feasibility or viability of a measure is we look at the total support yes, which you can see is 76%. 76.2 specifically. We then look at the definitely yeses and probably yeses as subsets of that, which tells us that there's still work to be done, but this is a very viable measure at 76%. It only needs 2/3, so 66.7 is a success, so we're well in excess of that level. The next set of questions that we asked were a variety of funding priorities. You see summaries, you see the full wording of some and summaries of some others here that won't fit on the slide. We asked these in a random order, and then we asked people, would you be much more likely, somewhat less likely, or much less likely to support the measure if you knew that some of the money would be spent on this particular service or priority. When we're done with the interviewing, we go back and we assign numeric values to each of these response categories so that a much more likely gets a 2, a somewhat more likely a 1, a no effect is a 0, somewhat less likely is a -1, and much less likely is a -2. That gives us a scale, an average, if you will, that ranges from 2 if everybody were much more likely down to -2 if everybody were much less likely. The reason we do this rather than just adding percentages together, you could see two different items. One might be 40% much more likely and 20% somewhat more likely. That adds up to 60%. You could see another item that was the reverse, 20% much more likely and 40% somewhat more likely, also adds up to 60%, but clearly with the intensity, they're an entirely different 60%. So the purpose of this is to eliminate that bias. And while it seems abstract, it does that very well. I'll also give you some percentages that will put some more context on it. We also look at tiers, as you can see defined here in the slide, and the reason for that is from a statistical perspective, each tier is basic, everything in that tier is tied. So they're all equally important. There are numeric differences, clearly, and that's important because at the end of the day, you've got to put one thing in front of the other when you're talking about a measure, and that is as good as anything. But statistically, each tier is a grouping that hangs together. So in our top tier, we have Keep Qualified Librarians at the top of the list at 1.29. To give you context again on what that means in terms of percentages of voters, that's 83% of the voters are at least somewhat more likely to support the measure based on that one item. So that's well above the 2/3 threshold necessary to be successful. We then have down at the bottom of the Tier 1, extend library service to underserved communities. That 1.09 equates to 72%, at least somewhat more likely to support the measure. So again, well above the two-thirds threshold that we need to be successful. Everything in between there is at least 72% or higher, somewhat more likely to support the measure. It includes things like continuing reading clubs for children and teens, maintaining library facilities, keeping libraries safe and clean, keep library staff from being laid off, restoring library hours, all some of the things that Brett has already talked about. Maintain book and material and digital collections, maintain children's book and material collections, provide safe places for children after school, maintain children's classes and services, expand senior and disabled services, and keep the new Roseland Library from being closed. All of those things are, again, between 72 and 83%, at least somewhat more likely to support the measure. Tier 2 is all positive as well, and in fact, it all exceed that same two-thirds threshold that we need to be as successful, but at slightly lower levels and with an error rate of in that 3.5% that we talked about. Some of these are just right above the two-thirds level. So important, positive, but not as strong as the first tier. And the same thing is true, obviously, for that last item. In fact, that one does slip below the two-thirds level. The next chart is a similarly long list of items. These are, in fact, all summarized. As you can see by the ellipses, they just won't fit on the chart. But these are a little bit more educational in nature, why we would want the money, what we would use it for, as opposed to just what we would use it for. The same rules apply as the previous question set in terms of making our scale, although the response categories are somewhat different. They are just much more likely, somewhat more likely, no effect. So it's 2, 1, 0. There's no negative side of this equation because it doesn't make sense to the respondents in the context of these questions. We still have the tiers that are statistically grouped together. In our first tier, we have all the money raised by this measure will be controlled locally. And let me read you the rest of that because it's important. All the money raised by this measure will be controlled locally, will go to local libraries, and cannot be taken away by Sacramento. That 1.38 equates to 78%, at least somewhat more likely to support the measure based on that. So again, well above this two-thirds threshold necessary for this kind of measure to be successful. Jumping down to the bottom of the list, we then have this measure is critical to maintain computer and high-speed internet access to county residents who do not have access at home or work. The 1.18 equates to 70%, at least somewhat more likely to support the measure. And everything, again, in the middle is at least at that level or above, and includes the library provides books and computer access to classes and services for those that can't afford to buy them. Public libraries are one of the few important community centers that benefit children, families, seniors, and the disabled. The measure will improve access to this valuable resource. Some communities, local schools, have been closed or severely limited to only a few hours per week, which makes our public libraries more important than ever. This measure will increase library services and on down the list. The good news is in Tier 1, there's lots of things that are important to people and make them more likely to support the measure. In the last tier, there's only a couple items there. They're right at the two-thirds level, and with the margin of error, they could be a little bit lower than that. Now, so after providing them that information as well as some of the other context-setting items, we came back to the ballot question a second time, and you can see here that we're now at 74.2%. From a statistical perspective, that's virtually identical to where we were when we started. So the fact that it is numerically different doesn't really matter. We are really still in a very, very good place for a two-thirds measure. 74% plus or minus 3% means 3.5% rather, means that at the low we could be at 70.7, 71% in round numbers, which still gives us a 4-point cushion above the two-thirds threshold that we need to be successful. In sum, the survey suggests a very strong base of voter support for a library measure in the county. Some of the top priorities include, as we looked at before, keeping qualified libraries and staff from being laid off, continuing reading clubs for children, maintaining library facilities, keeping libraries safe and clean, restoring hours, maintaining book and material collections. Some of the key information that voters want to understand is that all money is going to be used locally and can't be taken by Sacramento. The library provides a variety of materials for those that can't afford to buy them, and on down the list. And the final point is really that we believe, based on the survey, that the Library Commission should continue the process to place a library funding measure on the 2016 ballot. That concludes the summary I have for this evening. I'm certainly happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Just out of curiosity, in the context of time, when we gave this a shot in 2014, and I don't recall what firm did the research, but that
we did.
You did. You guys came in at 71% that time, if I recall.
I think that's right, yes.
And this is 76, so what would you give as a reason for that 5% disparity?
Oh, I think the difference is clearly the turnout. I mean, this is a presidential election, and it's going to have everybody that's going to vote is already going to go to the polls. In the 2014 election, that was by nature, because it's a gubernatorial election, smaller turnout, and that was probably a record low turnout for gubernatorial elections because, as we all know, Governor Brown was pretty much a lock, and the voters knew that, and so they stayed home.
Thank you very much.
Other comments? Go ahead. Commissioner McKenzie.
Hi, thank you for your report. It's very beautifully organized and clear. I was interested in the funding priorities. We have thought, and we've gotten a lot of comments about restoring the hours and felt that was very important. And on the funding priorities, restoring hours comes up number 6. And yet reopening on Mondays and enhancing weekend hours is, below the line. Do you have any guesses about what that is all about?
Well, unfortunately, we didn't do focus groups as a follow-up to ask the why. And every survey has lots of questions that get answered and lots more that are then prompted. I think it is different people have different needs. And when it's more generic, library hours, restore library hours, they're thinking it's going to restore the hours that I want. Whereas when you become specific, then you start excluding some people. In terms of are by doing weekend hours, if I commute and I want to go to the library at 8:30 in the evening, weekend doesn't help me necessarily. So I think that's probably what it is.
Other comments from commissioners? Thank you.
Thank you
very much. I would like now to open the public hearing to members of the public who wish to comment on the proposed ordinance. We do not have speaker cards. So for the sake of efficiency, I think what we will do is right there is an empty chair and down in the pit. So if you would like to speak next, please come and sit in that chair while the current speaker is speaking. And then we will move on to hearing people in an efficient manner that way. I would also like to begin by reading 2 letters into the record that we have received. The first is from Teresa Barrett, a member of the City Council in Petaluma. And she says to the Sonoma County Library Commissioners, I am aware that you are considering placing a tax initiative on the November ballot. I think it would be a good idea to give the voters of Sonoma County another chance to provide adequate funding for their public library system. I am well aware of the financial issues facing the library. I was the City of Petaluma's representative to the JPA Revision Committee and am the City of Petaluma's liaison to the Petaluma Branch Library Advisory Board. I hope this effort will be successful, and I'm happy to provide help and support to that end. Our libraries are an integral part of this county, and we need to make them better, stronger, and more accessible. Good luck, Teresa Barrett. The second letter comes from Bob Cox, a member of the Cloverdale City Council. We're at the north and south. I have been involved with the library since I was very young when my aunt took me to the local Oakland Public Library. During my years at the University of California, I worked my way through college, working in the engineering library. In the ensuing years, the popularity of libraries in general seemed to wane when the modern media consumed the lives of many of the former library visitors. Now libraries have embraced all forms of communication: hardbound books, books on tape, DVDs, both in book form and movies, and now the internet. Libraries are places to hold meetings, educational gatherings, story twine, and quite importantly to our Cloverdale area patrons, the replacement for the school library. The need for increased hours and the restoration of Monday schedule has never been more important. Unfortunately, the current budget of the Sonoma County Library System has been stretched as far as it will go. It can't keep up with the current needs, nor to mention the future programs that need funding. The library is not supported by county coffers. It relies solely on property tax that hasn't changed since 1978. Revenue from a sales tax measure will help greatly to bridge the gap. I support placing such a measure on the November ballot. Bob Cox, member of the Cloverdale City Council and liaison to the Library Advisory Board. And also he was a member of the JPA Advisory Committee. When you come to the dais, if you'd like to give you... Yes.
There may be some people who cannot manage those stairs, so we need to be cognizant of them sitting up above.
All right. And there's a speaker up there. So if you're up there, if you will give me a wave, I will see you. But we have someone down here now, and there are two people up there. So you're next up there.
Good evening, Mr. Chair. Good evening, commissioners. Good evening, staff. My name is Jake McKenzie, and you may recognize another McKenzie on the group of commissioners, and I will be happily admit to the fact that I'm married to Commissioner Barbara McKenzie. But there's no conflict of interest here. There's no financial interest involved, so I feel quite comfortable addressing this body. And one of the reasons I feel comfortable addressing this body and this subject is that I was present at the mayors and council members meeting in Sebastopol. I think it was 3 years ago. I can't remember. Time goes by. But we received a petition from your constituents, your library members, who came to us and said the existing JPA in its current format does not serve the needs of all the cities and all the citizens of Sonoma County. And it was as a result of that plea and also the fact that the library hours had been so brutally curtailed that we, as the mayors and council members, then entered into a dialogue with the Board of Supervisors. And then Supervisor McGuire, you'll remember this very well, Mr. Chair, as do others of you, Paul Heavenridge as well, I know, and others, came together, and you are now sitting as this reformed commission as a result of citizens coming and asking for redress, particularly on the library hours. So that's my plea. But the second thing I want to talk to you about is something that happened today. We were going over an old transportation measure at the Sonoma County Transportation Authority, Measure M. Measure M was carefully crafted in 2004. And how did we craft it? We crafted it so that when voters were voting for the measure, and it was a special tax and it did require the 2/3, that they knew exactly what they were going to get. They were going to get widened 101, which is coming to fruition. They were going to get improved interchanges. They were going to get Help to Smart, laid out with citizens' oversight. Money stays in the county. Projects get done. So I was, of course, not surprised, given the level of excellence of the work that's gone into preparing this, to find out that it's very clear in this measure to voters when they go to the polls in November. Adoption of expenditure plan under Section 16 and accountability for expenditures of the tax. It's right there. You can't mistake it. It's a 2/3 vote, and you have to assure the voters that they will get what they vote for. And what else is attached to it and becomes part of the measure. And that's what we were examining this afternoon. 12 years after we passed Measure M, how much money goes to bicycle and pedestrian projects, and there was a healthy discussion about how that money would be allocated. What was that based on? The expenditure plan that went in front of the voters in 2004. You have an expenditure plan in front of you. As you prepare to vote on adopting this, you can look upon this and see that it is good, or if you feel it needs to be tweaked, like we did 12 years ago, we added a wee bit to the bicycle and pedestrian expenditures. But you as commissioners have this solemn task to review the language, make sure that it is good, that it does what you want it to do, and then you can be comfortable going in front of the voters because you'll have done your due diligence. And for that, I thank you, and I urge you to vote in favor of putting this on the November ballot. Thank you.
Thank you. Oh,
That was me, I guess.
all right. The speaker up there.
Good evening, Commissioners. I want to speak in favor of putting the tax measure on the ballot. I'm a regular library user, and Sonoma looks pretty good, but a lot of the libraries around are what we could call down at heel, and only additional money will bring them so that they're more handsome, so more useful, more attractive to the public. Also, having more hours, more materials, having more time for staff to go out into the community, having staff have time for training instead of being able to get off the desk, not having them just have to go to get what needs doing done. So I strongly support putting the tax measure on the ballot and urge you to support it. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Good evening. My name is Jeremy Nichols. I am president of the Sonoma County Historical Society. As authorized by my board last month, I am here representing our 500 members to say that we are in favor of the 1/8% sales tax plan. We also encourage the library to do anything possible to support making the county's archives in Los Guilicos, which the library administers, more accessible to the public. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, Commissioners. I'm here to speak in favor. My name is Sean McCaffrey. I live in the city of Healdsburg. I'm here to speak in favor of the tax measure for a couple reasons. I had the pleasure of participating in the strategic planning process, which was really nice. And then Director Lear came and gave a report on that to us at the mayors and council members meeting in Rohnert Park. And looking at that and looking at the possibilities of what is possible for the library system and how there's so many different ways that it can serve people, especially underserved and underrepresented communities, I think it's really important that the library is well funded. And another reason is 2 years ago, we had a ballot measure, and it came within a couple percent of passing. And I was involved with some of the groups that helped put out signs and get the word out, and we got a bit of a late start. And I know that this time, if you're able to put this on the ballot, there are a lot of people out there waiting in the wings to really put a good effort into it this time. And I think there's a lot of friends groups, library boosters, supporters of the library, the gentleman from the Historical Society. I think that this time is the time to do it, and I urge you to put it on the 2016 November ballot. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Jane Snibby, and I'm chair of the Cloverdale Library Advisory Board. And full disclosure, I'm also a retired librarian. Recently, in fact, a week ago, there was a very interesting, lengthy piece in the New York Times about libraries in the New York area. And one of the quotes that caught my eye was, "Far from becoming irrelevant in the digital age, libraries are thriving, adding weekend and evening hours, hiring more librarians, and staff expanding. Libraries are one-stop community centers, essential part of civic life." And I would urge you, when you promote this tax increase, minor as it is, that you promote the idea of the community center that the library has become. I am a book person, but not everybody is. And I think emphasizing the idea of all the various things that Mr. presented to you is a very important way to go to capture people that may not be book people. So I would urge you to put this on the ballot and emphasize the community aspect of the library. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll go up there next.
Mr. Chairman and commissioners, as well as staff, thank you for your service on this commission and for your representation on this board. As a member of the Sonoma County Board of Supervisors, my name is Efren Carrillo. I'm not here in the official capacity as a member of that board, but I do want to thank the commission for your most recent presentation to the board. It was very well done, it was very thorough, and it gave us really a very bright future and a bright outlook to what's coming for the Sonoma County Library. Libraries, we know, are gems in our community. We also recognize that libraries provide the centers for communities. We talk about libraries being the heart and soul. And as the county tries to meet its goals of being the healthiest county by 2020, focusing on our upstream investments and ensuring that we provide evidence-based practices and early interventions, there's no better intervention than literacy and libraries, in my opinion. So as a member of the board, I do not speak for the full board, but I will speak on behalf of the constituents I represent. The libraries in our communities are important. The services that are offered are important. And as someone who grew up with public libraries in my life, being a student at Roseland School District and Santa Rosa City Schools, libraries were a place where I got to work on essays, where I got to work on reports, and libraries were a place where my parents got to learn English and study for their citizenship. Libraries today are now places where I take my boys to learn how to read and to experience what it is to have a library here in our hometown. So once again, I would implore the Commission to support the resolution before you, place this measure before the voters. I think that the prior ballot measure that was before the voters had a very short time frame and very, very low voter turnout. And in most cases in other communities, having a simple majority, you would have had approval. In this case, you need a supermajority, and I do believe that not only the recent polling, but the tendencies in these communities, we support schools, we support kids, we support libraries, we support seniors, and we support literacy. And there's nothing more important, I believe, as we try to close the divide around literacy, close the educational gap that libraries present. So once again, Mr. Chair, Commissioners, on behalf of the constituents I do represent in the West County, I would urge you to support the ordinance before you, the resolution before you. Thank you.
Thank you. Connie, could you wait? I'm going to ask for...
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Chair, Commissioners, and the library staff, and everyone here tonight. My name is Carol Russell. Like Robert Cox, I'm a city council member in Cloverdale, and I support everything that Bob Cox has written in his letter, and I'm so proud and so grateful of him and to him for his work. He really is very dedicated. You know, when I thought about coming here tonight, I thought about a lifetime spent in the library. I spent my entire childhood and more of my adolescence than I cared to admit at the time in the library, and I loved it. My grandmother had escaped Europe in the fall of France, and she taught me that books were my friend. They would be my friends all my life. And when I was a very little girl, she said, there's a place you can meet your friends, and it doesn't cost anything. And she took me to the library, in the middle of Manhattan. In fact, she took me not just to the library, she took me to the 42nd Street Library, okay? I really did. I thought the lions were smiling at me. I still do. We were as poor as you can be, but we were wealthy because of libraries. I had a passport, you see. You have it too, I bet. It's called a library card. I traveled all over the world before I was out of high school. I not only traveled all over the world, I traveled back and forth in time. I was in Dickens, London. I visited Cleopatra in Egypt. And I once got into F. Scott Fitzgerald's Jazz Age before the adult librarian caught me. More of that later. I also traveled the world that hadn't been discovered, thanks to recommendations of wonderful librarians about exploring science fiction. And I came here tonight because I am so desperate that we not fail the legacy we've all been given. I learned about democracy. I learned about America. I learned about government. I learned about so many things in libraries that would have been absolutely unavailable to me had I simply had to live in the world I lived in. And I feel it's our responsibility to continue it. I will do everything I possibly can, and I know the people of Cloverdale will support you because we love our library. And I want to thank our Library Commissioner, Reese Foxon, who has done a great deal to help us and to keep our library going in this very tough time. We will support this measure. We will support this modest tax. We can't afford not to. There are children like me who need this passport. And more than that, they need it because it's a free ticket to wherever they want to go, including their future. Thank you.
Hello, my name's Connie Williams. I'm a teacher librarian in Petaluma. As a school librarian in Petaluma, I've had the honor for the past couple of years to work very closely with the public librarians to put on our now world-famous Lumicon, and it's been an honor and a privilege to be able to work so closely with our partners in the public library world. And as a school librarian, I've been a school library advocate for the last 10 years, and we're seeing more libraries, both school and public, close than I care to think about. So if we truly value information, and it seems that we do, given our vast sharing of it over the wild west of the internet, then we really need to be opening more libraries than closing them. And what we come up against is the question, the eternal question that the public often asks, probably any of you as you're standing in line in the market. They certainly ask me, why do we need libraries? We have the internet. And it's good to be reminded that public libraries are anchor institutions for our community. Behind the scenes, they filter into many aspects of our lives, even if it seems that they might not be there. We don't talk about them a lot. But that's the nature of librarianship and the nature of our libraries. It's where we gather the ideas from near and far and freely make them available for anyone to use online or in person. They function as a place, as an online resource, and as the personification of freedom. The freedom to think as we wish, to write, to speak, interact as citizens of our country. I know that you know this. You're the Library Commission, for Pete's sakes. I think the discussion is really not about whether to add this measure to the ballot. I think that's a no-brainer. What I would like to see the discussion be is that the measure be written really well, and that we advertise it really well, and that we work the best folks around to create a campaign to bring the issue to the top of the ballot. I got a phone call the other day for a very similar survey to answer about roads in Petaluma, which are a consistent question. But I want to see the library measure rise to the top, and I think that we need to do that, and that's the challenge I have for all of us here, is to work together to make that ballot be the top and make libraries be the one that we all vote for, even if we don't vote for anything else. But I think we should vote for them all. But nonetheless, I want to make sure that what we say gets out there. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Jeannie Cox. I'm a member of the board of the Friends of the Cloverdale Library, and coincidentally, I am married to the Bob Cox who sent the letter. He regrets he had another commitment this evening, but right now I'm speaking from me. When I was about 7 years old, my next-door neighbor was taking her 3 kids to the library and asked my mom if I could go too. I'd never been to a library other than the small one at school. And I found the world of books. And I love the world of books. Growing up, I read more than I watched television. Now that I'm retired, I'm back to reading. I had the opportunity several weeks ago to man the tables at the Cloverdale Library, getting surveys done. I did a morning shift and an afternoon shift, and I thought I knew why people came to the library, and what an eye-opener. As I caught on to people to fill out the surveys and talking to them and just seeing what different areas in the library they were going to, I had no idea. I had no idea that many people came to the Cloverdale Library. One person there touched my heart. He was a young man, about 13 or 14 years old, a special needs child. And I saw him the morning shift, and I saw him again in the afternoon shift. And the morning shift, I asked him if he would like to fill out a survey. I had no reason not to ask him. He says, I don't want to do that. He says, I come here to read. I come here to feel safe. For that young man, let's put this sales tax measure on the ballot and enhance the place where he feels safe. Thank you.
Good evening, members of the Library Commission, Library Director Lear, and library staff and community members who are also here with us. I'm Marjorie Helm, licensed clinical social worker from Petaluma. And I've been a lover of libraries also since my childhood, when a weekly walk downtown always included a walk to the library and coming home with a boatload of books. Over our 30 years in Sonoma County, I've had the pleasure and honor of being involved with the library in professional capacities with Sonoma County Mental Health and as a social work educator. In addition, we raised our son with the library. Story times, events, books, and the amazing Petaluma librarians. After the death of our son at 11, about 16 years ago, a group of us co-founded a celebration of Dia de los Muertos Petaluma, Day of the Dead. And we were going for, with key members of the Latino community, a celebration that would bring together the disparate groups in our community to create bridges of understanding between communities. I'm so delighted to tell you that the library in Petaluma was a founding member of the organizing committee and has been involved with us the past 16 years. The Petaluma branch, as a collaborator and as a founding member, planned music events, bilingual preschool story times, and a whole range of opportunities for the whole community to come into the library during the month of October. And to celebrate the arts and culture and language of Latin and South America. At the same time that this was going on, the Petaluma branch increased its collection of Spanish language books and increased its outreach to the Spanish-speaking community, as well as its bilingual staff. Events still are always really well attended, and all members of our community feel comfortable in the library. For all of these reasons, I love the Petaluma Library. We'll always be a card-carrying member of the library because of its hardworking and friendly staff. It's a great community focal point to celebrate and promote an appreciation of the diversity in our community. We need strong investment in our libraries. It's clear that we need a financing measure to ensure that libraries are able to offer the excellent services for our changing communities. Thank you very much.
Hello, my name is Mike Daw. I'm a resident of Sonoma County, Santa Rosa. I work at the library too. I've been to a few of these meetings, and it's really hard to stand up here and talk after hearing what everybody else has already said. Moreover, I look around and I've been to a few of these meetings, and to see this many people here on a united cause for the betterment of our library is awesome. Now, my stories aren't nearly as great as the New York Public Library, but I've found a lot of my life at the library. I studied at the library in high school. I found my wife at this library. So in essence, I found my family here. And I also work Monday to Fridays. And I see, after over 5 years of the library being closed on Mondays, people still try to get in the doors when we're closed. And I work on Mondays through Fridays in the IT, and I see the back end of the libraries and the work that needs to be done for the betterment of our facilities, for the resources we have to provide the lifelong learners in our communities the opportunities to enrich themselves. So by all means, please support this measure, because we can be great, and we all want to be great, and the extra resources would be great. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Anna, and I'm a children's librarian in the Petaluma branch of the library, and I also work 1 day a week at the new Roseland branch here in Santa Rosa. And I must say that I am very excited about my job. I love working for the library. I was also raised in the library. I went to the Downtown Central Library my whole childhood. And when I had my children, their first outings were 2 story times. And it was a really nice way for me to get out of the house, even if for just a short while, and connect with other parents. And I think that now as a children's librarian, I see that every story time is the important part, is the parents connecting with each other. And as a staff member and a children's librarian in particular, the idea of this being on the ballot and being passed is very exciting. I know that along with myself, the other staff members that I work with are all very passionate about what we do and are very excited about the possibility of having the resources in order to do these things. Restoring the hours, being available and open for when families can come into the library. And the other thing that I would be particularly excited about was doing more outreach to schools. I would be able to go to classrooms, talk to kids directly through all of the ages, and then also be able to become part of the community more and the school systems more and find out what they needed from us. So please, put on the ballot. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Thomas Ells, and thank you for allowing us to address your commission on the library. And maybe I should speak back here. I hope what I'd like to do is ask for a moment and try to measure it. Say 10 seconds of silence for the man who was killed in our town just about 2 weeks ago, Sirak Tesfazji. And so just And what I'd like to do is read one of his poems. He was a poet. He was an itinerant poet and lived on the street. He was also a graduate of Sonoma State in literature. And this is one of his poems. As does Verarium sedates perception in nuances, necessitating shape on the landscape and morally distinctive in relationship and imperfect in the natural and of young wounds prevailing in contrast. Treating these elements in juxtaposed of signs repetitious in time. There's a lot said right there. Believe me. Beyond that, what I'd like to say is thank you for entertaining a ballot measure to expand the library. Libraries are really important. Professional libraries are necessary, and if you don't know how to access a library, you're not going to be able to access the professional libraries, for instance, whether they're at the junior college or at Sonoma State, whether it's engineering, nursing, law, any of these professions have to have a professional, competent library. We need to have people who are experienced in using a library in order to be able to use those libraries and to use those resources. For instance, not all the internet is the same. We may say, oh, everybody has the internet. Not all internet is the same. Obviously, there's asynchronous access and so on. Like that, I don't need to tell you about that. But there's also different components of a library, different professional aspects of a library. You can have CCH, which is a tax resource. You can have West. You can have LexisNexis, which you don't have at the regular library. You don't have at the county library. You don't have, but you might have at the law library. Having those various accesses is really important. So at a particular library, you may have those types of accesses and so on. There can be other types of There are many types of periodicals and things that you have to pay for. And so not all internet is the same, not all access is the same, not all libraries are the same. It's very important to have those capabilities. And thank you very much for your time.
Hello, I'm John Haupt, a resident of Santa Rosa over in Bennett Valley, also the branch manager at the Healdsburg Library, and the head of the Sonoma County Wine Library. When I was in library school, one of the most interesting things that we covered was, in fact, there was a course related to information and the quality of life. And I just wanted to say that I'm very passionate about that element of our service and how we, as a library, the energy that we put into the community actually raises the quality of life of everyone. And I think we get talked about a lot as the great equalizer, and we bring all of the levels and people of different ages and social backgrounds and cultural experiences together. And I think in doing so, in improving the quality of life for people at all levels, as we improve any other level in the community, you're improving everyone's. And I think I was thinking about this question of, the only thing I could really think of is, aren't we going to be okay? If we don't do this, aren't we just going to sort of manage? And of course, so, we're pretty smart and we're pretty good at balancing budgets. So I think if we have an amount of money in our budget, we will make it work. We're also pretty good at cutting corners. And I think the numbers that we saw in Brett's presentation showing the over time, we've slowly lost our hours, and now we have less, and I think is indicative of kind of what's happened over the last 40 years. And we don't, rather than just, making huge cuts all at once, it's sort of like, every few years we're doing a little bit worse, but we can kind of make it work by just cutting another corner or finding another place. Maybe we don't need to, whatever. And we'll keep doing that because librarians and library staff, I think, are committed to. We're so passionate about doing good that we're just going to do whatever we can to try to do good. However, I would ask in that, to anyone asking that question, do you want us to just continue stringing it along and just doing the best we can? Or will you consider that every dollar put into it means that we can raise the bar a little bit higher and raise the quality of life a little bit higher for everyone? And I'd say, given the heart and soul of the staff and our passion for doing good, I would say it's one of the things that, if something like this is passed, I think it's going to be very clear that it will be a success. I really don't see anything but the possibility that, if we had more resources, we will do amazing things with it. So with that, thank you. And please put it on the ballot.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Colette Michaud, and I am the CEO and founder of the Children's Museum of Sonoma County. And I have a special place in my heart for the library. 11 years ago, when I was trying to start the Children's Museum with absolutely nothing, the libraries opened up the door for us and let us be a part of the summer reading program. And so with just a van and some homemade exhibits, we went around to 6 or 7 different libraries over the course of the summer. And it was really through that experience that a lot of people got introduced to the Children's Museum. A lot of children from diverse backgrounds got to see the museum, and we got to get our word out there about the museum. So I'm very thankful to the libraries for helping the museum get started. So there's 3 reasons why I would like to see this put on the ballot today. One is I think it's really important for maintenance. We've gone from being a van and some exhibits to being a 43,000 square foot facility now that requires a lot of maintenance. So I'm very familiar with what that takes, and it takes dollars. It's so important to keep. And in that time that we did our Museum on the Go, we did it 3 summers in a row, and we visited all the libraries over those 3 summers. So I'm very familiar with the buildings, and I think that they do need serious upgrades and maintenance. So anything that we can do to help them would be good. The second reason is program enhancement, and this is really selfish. I loved what we were able to do with the Children's Museum and the library together, and I would love to see that continue, and I know some of the librarians have asked us to come back. Unfortunately, we're not in the position to do it at no cost anymore because we are a nonprofit, and we are servicing about 140,000 children and families a year. But I think through program enhancement, you can work with other service organizations like the Children's Museum and introduce children to all kinds of wonderful things that are going to inspire them. And I'll end by saying the third thing, inspiration. One of the children that was at the first library, the Guerneville Library, when we were doing the Museum on the Go 11 years ago, we were just finishing doing a science demonstration, and he raised his hand. He was 8 years old at the time, and he proceeded to very articulately tell us exactly what the science was that we were talking about. And we looked at each other and we were like, oh my God, this 8-year-old knows more than we do. And it was just this really wonderful experience seeing this. Who knows if he would have known about the museum? He just happened to come into the library that day. Well, now, 10 years, 11 years later, Will is still with the Children's Museum. He is now a camp counselor. So I'm very excited that he's with the Children's Museum still, and it's because of that experience at the library that he got that, and he's still with us, and I think he was inspired by it. So thank you very much, and I do hope you put this on the ballot. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Julia Fries. I am a former commissioner
I was the Commission's representative on the Joint Powers Agreement Committee, and I was also on the campaign committee of 2014. And I have listened to person after person after person come up here and talk about how important the library is to the community, to their children, to themselves. And I sit here and I look and I think, it's a bit like preaching to the choir. And then I remember that the reason you preach to the choir is because that's how you get them to sing. So I too am encouraging you to go ahead and put this on the ballot. I do want to talk a little bit, though, about something. I think there was a question asked about the 2014 campaign to one of the presenters. And my view of what happened there, just in case the fact that we came close but didn't pass it last time makes anybody nervous who wasn't involved in it at the time, is that we got on the ballot at the very last minute by the Board of Supervisors with very little time and incredibly underfunded. I look at it and see the fact that we came within 2% of a supermajority as evidence of the amazing support that these libraries have in our county. And with that in mind, I would encourage you to go ahead and give it a second shot during this presidential election. I think the results will be much, much better. Thank you.
Commissioners and staff, my name is Patricia Souza. I'm from Petaluma, and I can't say nearly as eloquently as everyone else how wonderful the library is. The proposition seems very well crafted, very thoughtful, but I have a different point of view. I'm worried about this particular election cycle. It's different than anyone that I've ever, and I'm pretty old. And there are 19 propositions, I think, going to be on the ballot. I don't know how many funding requests are going to be on the ballot. I know in Petaluma there's going to be a few. And I'm worried that your wonderful and needed request is going to get lost. The previous speaker spoke confidently that we can, in this very short time, I think, very short time. It's summer, people are on vacation, school starts in late August. We vote nowadays in early October, not really in November. I think about 88% of us vote early. I'm worried that this timing can be very challenging. With 19 propositions, I'm afraid people are going to get lost and get just saturated. And later on, they're going to go, oh, damn, I wanted the library, but it was lost. I never even saw it. So I do ask you, and you have wonderful, able consultants to really view. I worked for a school district for 10 years, and they always got their propositions or their ballots passed because they really took the time to investigate when do the voters that vote for our cause vote, and what is our best chance of getting our voters, and you guys know who those are, and your consultants know who those are, to actually vote. So I'm just asking for a thoughtful review that is this really the best time? Because we do need it, and you do wonderful work. Thank you.
Good evening, Chairman, Commissioners. My name is Jane Elias, and I'm a resident of Cloverdale. I'm happy to be here tonight, and I want to talk to you and thank you. Thank this commission, the members, the staff, the administration for all the enormous hard work that you've been doing over the last couple of years. I appreciate that work, and I know the community does as well. I also appreciate your honesty and being straightforward and putting forward the situation that's currently in place. It's rare to have a business, such as the library, that does not exclude any segment of the population and offers such a diverse selection of services and materials. And numerous people have spoken about their fond memories of the library over the years, and I too have those as well. But just recent one that happened was my niece unexpectedly came to visit this summer. And she's 14 years old. And we were able to go ahead and put her in the library to do volunteer work, helping out with the lunch program and the kids' craft program, where she was able to gain volunteer hours and service hours that she could put forward to her school. And it's something that isn't spoken about very often, but I think it's a really important element that kids these days have that opportunity to expose them to that type of education. And I know she certainly went away with it feeling really proud of the work that she did, and received a great letter from the librarian of the Cloverdale Library branch, and I think they were thrilled to have her. So it's just one more element that is not really often spoken about in any of the presentations that you put together. I was too disappointed that 2 years ago the measure did not pass. I look forward to having this measure on the ballot this year, and I fully support the 1/8% sales tax funding structure. And I have no doubt that should this pass, I would really like to see this not only pass, because I want to ensure the library not only survives, but it thrives to become the best library system we possibly could have. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there a speaker up there?
Yes, thank you. My name is Carl Jackson. I'm the treasurer currently of the Santa Rosa Friends of the Library. I've been on the board for 46 years. And it's nice to see it. Thank you. It's nice to see faces here that I frequently see at our book sales, thank goodness. In 1970, the first year I participated, we made $400 at one of our big book sales at the library. In more recent years, we've hit as high as $40,000 at one of the two big library book sales we have. We were at the fairgrounds for quite a few years. We've been over at the Vets Memorial Building the last 4 or 5 years for other reasons. Our group certainly supports the idea of getting that tax again passed. But as most of you may not know, we also lost 2, not just 1. Many of you may remember there was a statewide issue on the ballot in roughly 2002 or 2004. And our county actually supported that with a 2/3 amount. But guess what? The statewide ballot, 62%. Sound familiar? I think my biggest concern is something seems to be a break point. I was quite surprised that the bond issue for the junior college, which I attended, got the support it did, and we didn't get the support we should have gotten. There's a little tricky thing there. They've changed, as many of you know, they've changed that Prop 13 thing a little bit, tweaking. And so some things for schools do get passed, namely bonds. They don't need 66% anymore. I have a suggestion on that in a few minutes, but first I want to mention when we thought the statewide issue was going to pass, we actually had, the library has a set of plans. They're still up there gaining dust, I'm sure. A site was picked at the regional park out on Hearn Avenue. It's still there. The site can still be used. The rough plans are still in the drawer. When it failed, everything dropped. Not that many years ago, I think it's about 15 now, maybe a little bit more, we had a judge from Colusa County come over here because a relative had passed away, a much older relative. And Frank Morabito, who's our president, went out with myself to pick up all these books, which was a nice day. And he asked us how much money we made. And at the time, it was around $25,000 or $30,000. And that judge said to me, we had to close our library because the only money we could dig up came to $50,000 for the whole year. And at the time, a lot of other libraries in this state were devastated. And something else you ought to know, I think I mentioned to DeBrett, Prop 13 is just like any other legislation. There are special interests involved. and something you don't know, because David Sabsay, a librarian who many of you know here, Howard Jarvis, the Jarvis-Gann thing, Prop 13, lived in Yorba Linda, California. Have any of you completely read Prop 13? No, I didn't think so. He exempted in Prop 13 his own library. That might surprise you, but that happened. So they didn't get the suffering you got. Here again, special interest. I know a little bit about that too, because in my job each year I probably went through 3,000 to 4,000 bills in Sacramento to see how it would affect our agency. I have some other suggestions you might think about for the future. I've tried to talk to Mike McGuire, who I know very well, and it might be, since you now have Mike, a local, Mr. Wood of Healdsburg, a local, and Mr. Levin from Marin County, maybe you could individually or as a group meet with those three guys and see if somehow we can't tweak the law, Prop 13, to the advantage of libraries again throughout the state. We're missing it by so little. I got to figure more reasonable people are up there now than when Prop 13 was passed. Did I cover it all? Okay, I think that's pretty much it. One other thing, you need some very influential, affluent people involved with this. We don't have Henry Trione anymore, and we don't have Hugh Cotting anymore. So those of you that know the right kind of people, those names need to be on whatever you put out. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the Santa Rosa Library Commission, staff members. I'm here tonight, Brian Masterson. I'm a resident of Roanoke Park, but I'm really here as a former member of the lab. And I served on the lab for 3 years because I think the libraries are, as some of the speakers said this evening, they're a reflection of the quality of life in Sonoma County and in our communities. Much like a lot of the speakers this evening, I think the councilwoman from Cloverdale said it best. You know, a lot of us were library junkies. As a young kid and growing up in New York City in the Bronx, my grandparents took me to a library. And it's the first time I was open to a different world. And going through the children's program, it opened my mind and it created a passion in me for learning. And I think a lot of the successes that I have in my life and my career started in that library. In high school, in college, the FBI Academy, the Police Academy, all involved research, and I had a passion for learning. This past weekend, I was in Benghazi and the battlefields of Gettysburg, but I never left Roanoke Park. And I spend a lot of time in my life trying to protect the community as a law enforcement officer. And we talk a lot about being proactive and how do we steer people in the right direction? And how do we keep them from a life of crime, making bad choices? A library is a place for people to open their minds. It creates dreams and creates lifelong ambitions. And some of the speakers talked a little bit about, how our ballot measure is going to measure up against some of the other ballot measures. Well, there's something about the company you keep, and I've heard a lot of great speakers here this evening, and I know there's a hell of a team behind this initiative, and I want to be part of that team. And there's a word that we use in law enforcement a lot, courage. And ships are safe in the harbor, but ships are not designed to be in the harbor. You, as commissioners in this library, have to be courageous. The communities, the leaders from all the cities, all the residents of Sonoma County have to be passionate and get behind this measure. Because libraries are not meant to be closed. They're meant to be open. We talk about racial issues and diversity. You want to see diversity? Go to a library, right? You will see old and young, different races, different ethnicities, different party backgrounds, and they're all there for the common reason to expand their mind or seek entertainment. And it kind of concerns me. A lot of young people, they want to look at their smartphones and they want to be entertained by TV. Well, they need to go to a library and open their minds and expand their world in front of them. So I would encourage you to support this tax measure. Thank you for your time.
Good evening. My name is Gail Borgman, and I live in Sebastopol. This measure is going to generate $12 million, which is more than 50% of the current budget every year. And I just noticed on this presentation that 64% of that is going to go to personnel, apparently. But I don't see a real expenditure plan. I don't see real concrete goals that are necessary for this library to continue this system, and then, you know, how this money is really going to be spent. 64% personnel, 7% IT, I think it said. IT is the future. It seems to me that there's a little imbalance there. I appreciated your mentioning that the comparing of apples to apples is really important, because I know that the city of Sebastopol owns the building that the library uses as well. So, you know, is it acceptable to say that we need to have a 50% increase in a budget because we want to make libraries safe for children? I'm looking at this. I got this in the mail. This is fear-based. You know, there's nothing specific in any of this. And I think you're going to be in trouble if you don't really think about facts when you put this to the voters. I love libraries. I love libraries. I am in favor of libraries. But I also want to see some accountability. And I don't see the expenditure plan. I don't see a plan for the Citizen Oversight Committee. I'd like to see more facts. Everybody here has been saying all these wonderful things about libraries and how important they are. They are really important, but they're also important for critical thinking skills. You know, if the libraries are the seat of democracy, basically, that's the great equalizer, right? Give us information. If the libraries can't inform us of how they're going to spend this money, why should people just say yes? They should get the information. Libraries should provide the accurate information. I really do want to see the libraries thriving. And I hate to see a lot of money being spent on propaganda and politicking. I'd rather see it go to the libraries themselves. Thanks.
Thank you. Are there any more people wishing to address the commission? I'd like to thank all the members of the public who are here. Thank you for coming, and thank you very much for expressing your views in support of the library. Now we will close the public hearing. Thank you. Now we'll move on to now it's time for the commission to discuss the proposed ordinance and vote whether to adopt a resolution to introduce the proposed ordinance and waive the reading of the ordinance. Linda?
So moved.
Okay.
And that way we can discuss.
Right. That was the discussion. We'll have the discussion afterwards, but do you have a second?
I second.
All right. Open for discussion? People of the commission have anything to say regarding these proposals? The first is to consider the recommendation for reading the title and waiving the further reading of the ordinance and imposing a transaction to use the sales tax to maintain, restore, and enhance. And there is a motion. We'll start with just that motion. So is that what you would like to move? Okay. So moved. Seconded?
I second.
All right. Any further comment from the public? Any further comment from the public? All right. I will call the question. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All passed. All right. That's the first step. We now move on to the second step, correct?
The reading of this 6.2?
Let me scoot through here. Okay, the second. 6.2. That's what we just. Okay, yes. All those in favor of 6.2, which is reading. I think we just
Did that.
We just did that.
We did that. Combined.
Is there a second one we have to vote on?
I think we didn't do that first.
Okay. Now, I would like to move that the Sonoma County Library Commission schedule a meeting on July 18th, which is a week from today, at 6:30 to finalize the adoption of the ordinance and approve a resolution to call an election to place the ordinance on the November 16th ballot. That's when we would, November 2016 ballot. I have made that motion. Is
I'll
there a
second. Second.
Okay, I think it's important to see this particular decision to make this, to put this on the ballot requires a 2/3 vote of the commission. So it's important to know how many of you will be able to be here next Monday. Okay?
At 6:30.
At 6:30. And I will be in Spain, but
Do we have this room?
yes.
Okay.
I will be calling in at 4 a.m. in the morning to attend the meeting. So we do have a majority of the commission who will be there. I have a motion. Is there a second?
We second
Any public comment about the meeting? Okay, there being none, I will call the question. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Opposed? None. All right. So we will be meeting next Monday, the 16th at 6:30 in this room to vote whether or not to put the ballot measure on the ballot at the 18th. Thank you. Thank you for coming. You're perfectly welcome to continue to the rest of our meeting if you would like to. We're going to be having an election for chair. All right. Have we done everything we're supposed to do? Okay. What? We'll take a 5-minute break. We are going to reconvene. Well, I'm not so rested, but...
Are you ready for a presentation?
This one.
Is it tax measure?
No.
Facility measure.
Does it say facilities in it? There it is. There we are. All right. Okay. Let me get it full screen for you, please.
Oh, I'm renowned for being eloquent.
Isn't he eloquent? He was very, there were no jokes. Yet again.
So this is not a PowerPoint. This is just a PDF. Okay.
But you can still do full screen.
That's right.
All right, are we ready?
There you go. And you've got a clicker there. You can just.
Now it's beginning to feel like a normal meeting. All right, hello. Let me get these commissioners herded. Thank you. Okay, Linda. All right, moving right along. Next item on the agenda is the Facilities Master Plan presentation from MK Think.
Correct.
Let me get. Go ahead. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Evelyn Lee from MK Think. I'm a senior strategist that is working on the Facilities Master Plan for the library. We are hoping to get the full plan to you later this summer, but we wanted to just give the Commission an update of where we are today. So really quickly, just a quick project overview. I know Brett gives updates or speaks of our progress at each meeting. Talk to you a little bit about our project team, where we are with our deliverables, the current findings, some next steps, and then open it up to questions to all the commissioners. So the project overview, the Sonoma County Library Master Plan is a follow-up to the strategic plan, looking at how we would like to, or the community would like to develop the facilities and how the facilities can better support the community well into the future, 10 years into the future. So understanding the current use of the libraries, spatially as well as programmatically, as well as how it is used by the employees as well as the public. So these are the various different things we are currently looking into. A little bit about our project team. Rachel and Nate are here behind me, supporting me from MK Think. We are a design and architecture think tank located in San Francisco. Rachel and I, and actually the majority of the team, are all strategists. And our work really focuses on the programming aspects that goes into understanding how to increase utilization of your space and how to better provide a space that fits with the organization mission, vision, and goals. Here are the list of deliverables that we are working on for the Sonoma County Libraries. Keep in mind that all of the work is done in alignment with the strategic plan tenets that you guys formulated last year. The first two we have pretty much accomplished, mostly by visiting each of the libraries on site, and we are currently working on deliverables 3 and 4. This is a project schedule. I know it's a little hard for you to see on the screen, but you each have it in front of you. Again, we are approaching the commission during the presentation where we're looking at actually putting together the facilities master plan report as well as the design guidelines. So some of the current findings relative to the overall infrastructure of the library, and we realize that a majority of the libraries, all but one, are leased facilities. However, just to get a current understanding of those facilities and the states and necessary improvements to keep the library safe and accessible, these are some of the things that we're looking at. So end of life of HVA systems, understanding anything that is non-compliant related to ADA accessibility, and looking at other things like water intrusion on the roof that could actually damage not only the building structure integrity, but materials within the library itself. This page is an example page of the various different data sets that we are looking within each library that will inform our final recommendations. So on the top upper right-hand corner, we've mapped out the space use of the library relative to stack space, space for the community, space for children and teens, and then user support. We are looking at head count within the library. We are looking at metrics regarding energy use. We are looking at the programs hosted in each library, and then overall demographics related to or changing demographics within the county of Sonoma. So some of our demographic findings, and the next two slides are very similar, but are kind of pointing out two different things, is the change in population from 2000 to 2010 relative to the community served by each library. And I think since most of your audience has left, the gentleman from Roseland would find this graph very interesting in terms of how many community members Roseland is currently serving. The next graphic, and this is again just an example of some of the type of demographic information we're putting together relative to each library, shows the change in population in the communities serving each library. So the communities that are growing versus the communities that are having more individuals move away or slowing down. So some of the questions that we would like the commissioners to address is, in particular, what are your favorite aspects of the library? We would love to talk to you or have you denote where you would like to see the library going in the future, especially in your community. And if there's any specific case studies or other libraries in the U.S. that you would like us to look into that inform our final guidelines. And I will be calling each of you individually because I know we have a short amount of time here to get your feedback and response to those questions. And then, so finally, again, we're looking at having individual discussion with each of you, but we welcome comments at this meeting as well. We are meeting with both the JPA members as well as the Friends of the Library in the next week to get their input into the final master plan. And then we hope to round up complete all the deliverables and finally make a presentation of all of our final findings at a commission meeting in the future. So here's my contact information, and we welcome any feedback on particularly design guidelines and what you would like to see regarding the future of the library.
Commissioner McKenzie, did you have some?
Yes, I have some questions. Thank you for your presentation. This is the first time we've seen this,
yes.
So we're kind of racing through it. I'm curious about when you're talking about the next steps, meeting with JPA.
Yes.
Who's the JPA?
So the Joint Powers of Authority, so essentially the landlords to most of your libraries.
It's who?
The landlords. to most of your libraries.
So you're going to meet with the cities who have the libraries?
Yes.
Are you meeting with the city?
The owners? And then Ken is...
I mean, I can speak to that, Ken. It was important to me that we, involve as many stakeholders as possible in this. So there might be some incorrect words, uses of terminology here. You guys are basically the JPA, but the porting authorities, I wanted these guys to meet with the cities and towns in the county. So Ken has extended an invitation to mayors, council members, either has or will. And if that doesn't work, he'll work with executive aides in that, but get as many people who are willing from the appointing bodies to talk to MK Think, because they mostly maintain the exteriors. So we want to get them involved. And then we're also putting together conversations with our friends and foundations, since they invest in our facilities through equipment and that. Are those the main community conversations that will still occur? And then we're inviting lab members as well to those Friends Foundation meetings.
How is that going to happen? Is there a meeting set up and everybody's supposed to come to a central location, or?
Yeah, this Friday there's 2 meetings.
Can you talk into the microphone, Ken, so we capture?
It's not on.
Okay.
There's 2 meetings this Friday for the council members that Brett talked about, and the city, the mayors. And then there's 2 meetings again next Tuesday for the Friends of the Library and the lab.
So I don't know about any of these things. How was the word getting out?
Well, we sent the word out to the lab chairs to invite their lab members to these meetings. Is that correct, Ken?
Yeah, the lab chairs and the Friends presidents. Those 2 meetings are Friday, and then we also sent out email invitations to all the council members and all the cities and towns, the city managers or administrators, and asked them to invite any of their staff that they would like present at these meetings.
Well, I haven't heard from the Friends or the lab, either one, so I was kind of curious about it. And there is a central meeting down at Central Branch?
Yes.
What kind of response have you gotten?
From the Friends, I talked to quite a few people that said they plan on being there.
Okay.
There's been a few council members that have emailed back and said they were sorry they couldn't make it. There were other people that emailed back, said they'd be there, or they'd send a representative.
Ken, does that mean that we're speaking of all the disparate friends, labs, city councilmen from all the different 13 communities?
Yes.
And how long has it been to orchestrate that? I mean, just...
Well, how long has it been to orchestrate it? We set up the meetings and set out the invitations in the last 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Now, we realize that not everybody can make it.
Right.
There's 2 meetings set up Friday for Friends and Foundation and lab members.
And those are all to be here or central?
Yes.
So people are going to be, yeah. I think that's a pretty tough gig. Yeah, that's what I think.
Okay.
I just have one other follow-up question on the demographic analysis. I always think of demographics being more than just population numbers. Do you have anything more specific than just head counts?
Within each library?
Well, you're talking about, designing for the populations of...
Yes. So, this is just a sample. We've gotten plenty of data from Ken and Brett regarding, individual patron usage, daily counts coming in and out, which is head counts, library, internet usage. So we've collected a lot of different use data that we are assembling regarding each library and understanding that, looking at the entire facilities master plan.
You're just talking about raw numbers of users and so forth. You don't have any more specific demographics. That's what I always think demographics means. I mean, the ages and so forth.
We have ages, and then we have census population served by each library. We have ages in terms of library card users, but it's Rachel, do we have any additional specific?
Much more demographic information. These are just a couple of examples of things that we've looked at. So we're also looking at ethnicity breakdowns, income breakdowns. So that's just one sample of one of the things we're looking at.
Okay.
You need to use the mics.
Sorry.
Okay. In other words, this probably isn't the time for me to say that I'd like libraries to have study rooms and more improved children's services rooms with or computer labs or those
This
kind
is
of.
absolutely that time.
All right. So I would like to have libraries have more study and small group rooms. I would love it if, I had the benefit of visiting Brett's old library system, former library system, and I walked into the children's room and I was astounded with what children's rooms could be. Particularly one of them was all set up like a classroom with a stage, and so I'd love it if we could do that. And I would also love it if we had some ability to provide ongoing computer education to people. Any other things people?
Well, I just wanted to ask, so what you've given us here tonight is just a very brief summary example of the kinds of information you're going to come to us with or ask us about, and you're going to meet with each of the commissioners individually, is that correct?
Yes, to help to inform design guidelines and understand how you vision the future of your library within your community.
Okay, so.
But I'm going to be in Spain, so I've given you my.
Noted.
And you said you anticipate that this would all be pulled together and something would come out later this summer. Correct. With more information. So I guess one question that was brought up by these other questions is what if you don't get all the people participating that we really need to participate in this? I mean, are we going to have follow-up meetings or will somebody go out to, say, the city of Cloverdale to, gather up information if they don't show up to the meeting on Friday or Tuesday? Or what happens then? Or that's just their only chance and that's it?
Brett, I think, has an answer.
Yeah, so to step back a little bit, what MK Think has done to date is analyze the physical condition of our buildings, and then that's largely the piece that's been more or less complete. Now we're analyzing how the public uses the buildings and how the staff use the buildings. So what we design as far as design guidelines won't entirely rest on interviewing the public, because sometimes the public does not know what a library should be. But we're giving the public an opportunity to weigh in on that, as we are staff. That's why MK Think's in front of you all. That's why they're in front of you all tonight, to get commission input, and then you'll have an opportunity to talk to Evelyn one-on-one. But there is a timeline here. We're giving labs, friends groups, and the foundation opportunity to inform the group. But they're also doing site visits and observation and various different strategies to see how the public wants our buildings to function, and how the staff too. And that's the other piece that's very important. We have workrooms that are 30 and 40 years old, and they may not be designed in a way that makes sense today. So I've also asked them to look as closely at the staff work areas and make suggestions around workflows there.
How much input do you want from the commission right now on visioning, or do you want to wait till the individual?
Well, so it's purely based on time constraint. We're happy to continue this conversation, but I am happy to spend as much time on with each of you as needed to walk through things.
I just have one short. When I said it's a tough gig, and what Helena said about gathering these lab members, and we're gathering council members and all of those stakeholders, I think that's going to be a pretty tough thing to orchestrate in a relatively short period of time without a lot of feedback. That's what I think.
Okay, so I think we can revisit with Brett and Ken and look at that plan. The other thing that we are doing in answer to Helena's question previously is that Brett and Ken have given us access to all of the surveying that was done relative to the stakeholder engagement piece, or not the stakeholder engagement piece, but the development of the strategic plan. So all of that information that was previously gathered, we're looking at again to understand the community voice and input into the design of the future facilities.
Yeah, so some of that was at the direction of Ken and I, that we spent a year having focus groups in that with 2,000 residents, and we do have a great deal of information from those conversations that are building specific. So there was a decision by Ken and I too not to necessarily redo that process twice.
Okay.
Well, could I just suggest, since I am a member of the Friends Board and also the lab, and I didn't get an email from either one of these groups, that maybe the emails just be sent again to make sure that the word is getting out?
Okay. Thank you. You can request that.
Merely a suggestion. Thank you.
Okay. Any other comments from the commission regarding whether they want study rooms or not? We'll move along. Thank you very much.
Okay.
And we know that we're at the beginning of this to some degree.
And I look forward to talking to each and every one of you. Thank you.
I do have one suggestion, and that's that the lantern board be included in the emails that get.
We already did that.
I'm sorry, what?
They've received the information.
Okay.
Does anybody know why that mic's not working? It would be nice to make it work. Okay, now we're moving on to the election of officers. I would like to nominate that Helena Whistler become the chair of the commission. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Are there any other requests for nominations for chair? Any other people who would like to suggest? All right. I would like to call the election. All those in favor of Helena becoming the chair?
Aye.
Any opposed? No. I moved it, and I believe you seconded it? Barbara seconded.
I seconded.
And now
Okay.
we're going to the vice chair.
Now we're going to the vice chair. Helena?
I'd like to nominate Hillary Smith for the position of vice chair.
Is there a second?
I'd second that.
Is there any other nomination?
Yes, I'd like to nominate Reese Boxon. Reese shows up to most everything. She's the person who wrote the presentations that we gave to our
I
city.
think we'll just let you go with the nomination.
Oh, thank you.
All right. Is there a second to that nomination?
I'll second that.
Who seconded it?
Barbara.
Okay, so we have two people nominated to be vice chair. This is a rarity. We've had, are there any comments from the commissioners regarding the election, or shall we just vote for the people for
Both
the
well qualified.
All right, both well qualified. All right. We have in the past had elections where we had a secret ballot, and we were told that that was not right. So this will be a vote. All those in favor of Hillary, please raise your hand. All right.
Can we vote for both of them?
No. All those in favor of Reese, please raise your hand. All right. I believe Hillary has been elected the vice chair of the commission. I would like to make a quick statement about being chair. I'm not turning cartwheels. But I would like to basically thank the commission. It has been an interesting 3.5 years. And I think anybody who's been around the library realizes that it's been an interesting 3.5 years. But I have been able to call on people on this commission and had almost everybody always say yes. And I know that you're here because you believe in all the things that we heard about today. And I do appreciate having been the chair and never getting a no. And I know that many of us serve on 1 or 2 committees. We have several meetings a month. And I cannot say enough how much I appreciate the membership of this commission. Thank you. All right.
Thank you, Tim.
Oh, you're welcome. Moving on to the library advisory boards and Friends of the Library announcements. Is there anyone from any of those groups who would like to address the commission? Seeing none, we'll move on to commissioner reports. I will remind people in terms of commissioner reports that we've had a long meeting. And I will begin by saying the only thing I really have to report is the committee met of the chairs of the committees, and we came up with some interesting ideas. But one of the ideas that came up was the idea of thinking of perhaps having some professional books for library commissioners. So I would like to encourage you, if you think of an area that you would like to have some professional reading about, if you would send them to me or the new chair, and we can pass them on to the materials selection. But there is, I don't know if you know it, but downstairs outside of the Human Services Department, there's a professional library. But if you look there, it's for librarians. And so if there are any areas that people would like to be able to read about to improve our service, please let me know. And then we'll continue on down the table. Go ahead, we'll start with you.
In terms of
Commission reports.
I will be the liaison with the Sonoma County Library Foundation, and we will meet next Wednesday in regards to the. Let's go.
Okay.
I just want to share that I will be speaking to the Sebastopol City Council on an annual report, and Vicki, and I'm going to butcher your name because I don't have it in front of me, but Vicki's going to join me in that presentation. Sebastopol Lab doesn't meet again until August, the first Wednesday in August. The lab and the Friends, as well as Lantern, has been doing outreach to the community through attending the farmers market. I think they're going to be going to the Barlow and soliciting applications for library cards and that sort of thing. So that's all I have to report.
It's okay. It's a long meeting. I'm not going to say anything.
I'll be very quick. We had our first overlapping meeting of the Friends and the Lab in the Rohnert Park branch on June 21st. It went very well. The intention is to strengthen both groups and have everybody kind of get to know each other and work together, find opportunities to work together. Item number 2 is out of that meeting. One of our lab members who hasn't in the past been active volunteered to host the table at National Night Out in Rohnert Park on August, I believe it's the 2nd. So already a good thing has come out of it. And lastly, I attended a Library Foundation fundraiser, which went very well and gave me an opportunity to say a couple of nice things about the library.
Cloverdale Lab has been working the farmers market every Tuesday afternoon. They have not done a Friday Night Live yet. I've been continuing to work on the Sustainability Action Plan, and finally I was reappointed by the Cloverdale City Council for another term as commissioner.
Yay!
Nothing really to report. The Santa Rosa Lab will be meeting on July 20th, and I'll be attending that meeting.
The Windsor Lab is meeting tomorrow afternoon at 5. The Friends have been doing book sales at the Sunday Farmers Market and passing out hoopla bookmarks.
The Guerneville Lab is meeting this Wednesday, and let's see, we had a presentation to the Board of Supervisors a couple weeks ago, and that went very well. We had a lot of good responses. The big takeaway for the supervisors was that we had over 50% of the Sonoma population in a library card. They couldn't believe that. That was pretty amazing. But anyway, and also at tomorrow's supervisor meeting, I will be reappointed for 2 more years as on the commissioner. So, yay!
I also attended the Cotati Runner Park Lab meeting in June, and I will just add to Commissioner McKenzie's report that I believe the next meeting will be August 16th at 5 o'clock. I attended the Cotati Kids Day Parade this past Saturday and had a lovely time sitting with a couple of the children's librarians, signing kids up for summer reading still, and passing out bookmarks and playing with all kinds of activities, so that was fun. And I also attended the Chair's Executive Committee meeting that Tim spoke about. Semi-exec, quasi-executive?
Chair of Chairs, Chairs meeting. All right, thank you. That was a very short. Yes. All right, we'll move on to reports. Director's Evaluation Committee.
Director's Evaluation Committee met July 8th at 4 o'clock at Central to discuss goals for the coming year for the Director's Evaluation. We will meet again in August.
Finance Committee.
The Finance Committee met June 20th at the Central Library Conference Room. Commissioners McKenzie, Whistler, Grill, Director Lear, and CFO Neiman were all in attendance. Commissioner Neff also attended. No members of the public were there. The committee reviewed the monthly financial reports. Items over $25,000 were the PG&E bill and the payment to Lou Edwards for both the monthly consulting fee and the mailer. The committee rediscussed the current fund balance policy, and after discussion, we all agreed to CFO Neiman's suggestion that we relook at the policy again after November. The results of any tax measure vote would be known, and the ad hoc OPEB PERS working group will have the opportunity to study these topics, and so that would have an impact on the fund balance policy. The committee also reviewed and approved both the revised purchasing policy and the revised delegation of authority policy. And the committee then interviewed the 2 audit firms. We only had 2 audit firms respond to the RFP. We felt both of them were well qualified, had good discussions with both. We came down on the side of the local firm of Pacenti and Brinker. And that's our recommendation to you tonight. The next meeting of the Finance Committee will be held August 15th as regularly scheduled. Thank you.
Public Relations Committee.
Public Relations Committee met this afternoon. We discussed and clarified I lost it. It'll come back. Oh, I love it. It's getting late, you guys. The perspectives and how we would advocate with the 1/8 cent sales tax measure potential. We discussed some of the grand jury and some of the ramifications for advocacy and PR with that. We also talked about the speaker's points and the key messages that have been suggested through the consultation group. And Tim has suggested that we change the PR name from Public Relations to Advocacy Committee. So that's something that needs to be discussed at some point along the way. Okay, that's it. Except now I talk about the revenue enhancement. Again, we talked and clarified any questions that might come up around the resolution to move forward with the sales tax resolution. Also, we discussed the roles and responsibilities that the committee would take on if it moved forward, or if it did not, if it died, what would we do then? So that was what we discussed.
All right. Let's move on to, I believe you've...
Next week.
Next meeting. All right. Is there any public comment on the committee reports or commission reports? Now we move on to approval of the minutes. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved. Second.
Oh, okay, so it was moved. Did you see that?
You see that?
David E. Bright?
That was.
And who seconded it?
I guess I did.
Okay. All right. Any conversation or discussion about the minutes? All those in favor of approving the minutes?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? All right. Moving along to the consent calendar. Are there any items that a commissioners wish to remove from the consent calendar? Seeing none, I consider the consent calendar moved and approved. Now we're on to we're clicking through this part quite quickly. We're moving to the discussion items, director's report.
Unless there's any questions for me, I'd like to skip my director's report tonight. Most of my activity's been preparing for the public hearing this evening and that. One thing I forgot to mention earlier, you saw it on my slide presentation, but you are the first to see the new library logo. It's over there on the stand. But that comes out of work with staff at Staff Day. Our graphics designer, Kathleen Greco, put a lot of work into that. I think it looks beautiful. We'll unveil it to all staff on Friday. So Tom and Kim, you're not allowed to look at it until Friday. But forgot to mention that earlier. And I'm happy to take any questions from the management report.
Are there any questions from the management report? Yes.
I just actually just wanted to mention that Chief Masterson, who came down and did a very eloquent presentation, and I also ran the torch on the children's reading program, and jogged in with these motorcycle policemen behind him. It was very impressive. Anyway, he's a man of many talents. And I also want to just ask a question. I saw that you know what? This was based on what we already talked about, the local strategic planning. I know. Local strategic plan expert to facilitate a staff session in August about deciding which services are no longer aligned with our strategic plan. Will that just come back to the commission as a fait accompli, or will we be involved in any of that? Or
That'll be a staff conversation. That'll be operational things that we'll look at. Are we doing things now that don't align with our strategic plan, and other things that we can set aside in order to focus and create the staffing capacity to achieve the goals and objectives? So I would report on that in the management report, but not necessarily come to the commission for input.
All right, I know I am redundant about this, but I think part of the packet that should glow is this report. It's just amazing what we do and what happens. I'm continually impressed. Any other comments? Yes, Commissioner McKenzie.
I forgot this one. At the very end, it says electronic self-registration will be available to our customers around now. And that people can actually, if you don't have a library card, you can go on to the library website and get your own library card. Is that what that means?
You want to quickly speak to that, Vicki?
I can. In anticipation of Library Card Sign-Up Month in September, and so that we can
pull in customers, our patrons from all around the county with all these electronic resources that we have. You can sign up for a temporary access to our services. The sign up is for 120 days. Right? So then that gives you access to things like Hoopla, gives you access to Mango Languages, and a number of all of our other electronic resources. So it's just opening that electronic doorway for our customers. And as we move forward, to September and library card sign up activities that the management team are working on, then it's just kind of a step in the right direction, I guess we'd say.
So during those 120 days, it's assumed that you do have to go in and actually get a card then?
Well, during this 120 days, what it means is that you have limited access to electronic services. We've already had people from all over the county start signing up, coming in, they place a hold on something, then they come in, show proper identification, and of course, get the actual physical library card. But what we want to do is, not limit people to having to come in through the physical doorway. You don't go anywhere when you get on Amazon, right? So you can sign up yourself for Amazon services and so forth, and it's the same sort of concept. And when it comes to the physical materials, you want to check out books or media or anything in a physical way, then you can place a hold on a limited number of things, come in, and then get your physical library card.
How are we getting the word out about this?
Well, right now we did what we call a soft launch for that, Commissioner McKenzie, because we want to make it more loud and clear as we get closer to the actual launch of the library card sign up. So we did this to make sure that everything works, and we've tested it out both with our partner libraries in Lake and Mendocino counties, and both the directors there were just jazzed about that idea. So we just did a soft launch, and then we'll be doing more publicity as we get closer to the September 1st time frame.
Fantastic, thank you.
I just have to say, yay, Hoopla.
You like that?
I downloaded 3 movies on my flight to Maine, and then I downloaded 3 from Maine to my flight back.
I have a question about Hoopla. Do we have a limited capacity? What is the capacity for checkouts?
There's, you have 10.
No, I know personally my capacity, but is there a limit to how many our system is allowed? Or?
Yes. There is. We actually have a dollar amount associated with the resources that we have access to, and that's why we've limited 10 per month, and it's a rolling 10 per month per person. So depending on what it is, it's the download is 99 cents. There's a pricing structure just for libraries for this. So we've allocated a certain funding amount for the fiscal year. So, and that's how we calculated the 10 items rolling per month. We're going to see how that goes. If people aren't using it as much as we thought, then we know we can always go up, right, and allow a greater number of checkouts. But you don't want to go back. You don't want to say, oh, no, you can't.
You only get 2.
Right.
I have a question for you after the meeting about the app. All right.
I just have one comment.
Yes.
And that is the Healthy Living at Your Library classes. I think that's a fabulous idea. And I don't know what we're doing to also encourage management and staff to attend those classes as well. I think that would be important.
Okay. Monthly financials. Any comments or questions for Ken? Anything, Ken, you want to?
Nothing really about the financials, but I want to let everybody know and introduce Fergus Wilson, our new facilities manager. Today is his first day.
Hey, welcome.
And he's had over 12 years of experience, and most recently he was working with the Bay Area Air Quality Management District. So we're really happy to have him. So say hi to him if you can.
Okay. Any questions from Commission about the financials? Any public comment regarding any of the management report, the director's report, or the financials? Okay, the final thing is the quarterly status report on the evaluations, work plans. We've got a slight increase. This is an ongoing target. Any comments? Comments, commissioners? No, we still? Wait, here, very quiet. All right.
It's still away.
All right. Okay, any lab, are there any lab appointments this time?
Yes.
Yes, all right. Shall we have a blanket appointment or, yes?
I do want to make one comment, if I may, about the appointment of Hannah Taylor with Roanoke Park Cotati Advisory Board. Hannah has been our youth member. She's a high school student. She's just been terrific. She's really poised and terrific. And anyway, she just graduated from high school as a valedictorian, one of the valedictorians at Rancho Cotati High School. And she is going off to Sonoma State, and so she's going to re-up on our lab, and now she'll be a great liaison to Sonoma State University. So really, and she turns out to be Julie Taylor, one of our librarians' niece. So anyway, I wanted to point that out because it's kind of a new thing that we're adding, is this ability to connect with Sonoma State.
All right.
I have one comment. I want to say to you, Tim, that, you know, in the tenure that I've been on this board and observing what an incredibly stressful position being chair of this group of people and in the context of the whole library, you've really done a hell of a job, and I think we owe you a deep measure of gratitude.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. Moving right along to library, thank you. Moving right along to library advisory board appointments. Can we have a motion to appoint all of them? That was Linda.
Second.
Barbara. Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? There being no opposition, they're all appointed. Okay, we're doing fairly well, folks. Any items to include on the commission notes?
The election of the officers.
Election of the officers, and also the public hearing, I think, I don't know how to summarize that, but my heart glowed. I don't know about anybody else's, to see how important the libraries are to people. That was wonderful.
A big thank you to Tim.
Oh, thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Maybe mention the grand jury report and that we'll be discussing it at the August meeting.
Yes.
And the special meeting in Coventry.
And if it goes out in time, the special meeting in July. I think it's important to note that we are embarking on our facilities management and that we have a new person on staff. Anything else? People, you're putting away your...
We're just tidying.
Okay, we are adjourning to the next special meeting that'll be held at 6:30 in this space next Monday evening. We are adjourned.